When I was about 19, I met this guy who worked at the subway near where I worked. He was a nice enough guy and he took me out on a date. Everything started off really well, but about a week into it he started asking me for money. It started off small at first, like for a soda or $5 for gas. Then he started asking for larger amounts, like a few hundred to get him by for a week or so. I never gave it to him, but he started wanting to move in together within about 2 weeks of dating. When we would go out places he started to do very weird things. He would start screaming in public or singing nonsense at the top of his lungs. He would always play around afterward that he was just having fun, but it was weird and embarrassing to be seen with him. Also, my dog who loves everyone would not let him near me. I've never seen that dog so much as growl at another person, but he would try and bite the shit out of him when he came close to me. By the end of the second week I broke up with him over the phone. I normally didn't do that, but at the time his erratic behavior made me nervous. He completely flipped the fuck out. He started showing up where I worked to the point where my manager had to ban him from the building and coworkers walked me to my car. He would show up literally everywhere I was, even to the grocery store or the gas station. I started getting text messages and weird email about how we were meant to be and he couldn't live without me and such. Then one day he showed up in the middle of the night and told me to come outside. I told him to leave or I was going to the cops. He literally started sobbing to the point where he was almost hyperventilating. I went back inside and locked the house up. The next day I was home alone and just doing some work. At the time I was in college, when I heard some rustling by the front door. I thought it was just the dog messing around or the mailman or something, but the dog started barking and growling. The doorbell began to ring. I didn't think much of it, probably just a solicitor. Someone started messing with the door handle. I grabbed a broom of all things because that was all I had and I heard someone open the door. My dog tried to bite him and I locked myself in my bathroom and started screaming that I called the police. He up and ran away. I called my neighbor who lived across the street from me and was former military. He checked out the house and made sure he was gone. My dog had a few scrapes and cuts on him, but he was okay. I filed for a restraining order the next day and my dad took the liberty of calling his father and explaining what happened. I received a few other emails him following that, but he never came to my house again. Luckily, I've moved a few hours away and I'm married now, but it was still very frightening at the time considering this was only about a 3-week period. A few years ago, my anxiety was I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it, but that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside my window. Like every single night, it just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out I'd go wake my parents up and get them to look outside, but they never found anything. I started to think I was crazy or just subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up and the bottom pane is fogged, so I'm not sure the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, heard sounds again, nothing. The night after, however, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside of my window, back just enough to allow someone to sit on it but still see. On my windowsill was a bag of now cold McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there, but still, some fucker had been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room without me knowing for I don't know how fucking long. The cops were called, nothing happened. I felt crazier than ever. No one was to be found, but at least we had some evidence that someone that shouldn't be hovering around our house was at my window, watching intently through the blinds, in a space between the two curtains. Heard noises the next night. Ran outside, nothing. Earlier in the night I'd sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently it did, because now the fucker had taken to climbing on top of our air conditioning unit, and from there, climbing onto our Herbie/garbage can, then standing on that so that he could see above where the drapes went. The handprints and shoe prints were left on the lid to prove it. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard these holes be created. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow. We found it outside my window, and was trying to stealthily break away the screen bit by bit. The hole is still there. The next night, I distinctly heard the gravel near my window crunch. There was simply no mistaking my sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan he surely heard and rolled just out of view, as if I were sleeping, then pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door, and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened their door and sneaked in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub and peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open and my parents ran outside. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leapt off of the Herbie and bolted down our driveway, which was what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the tops of their lungs. "You sick motherfucker, I'm gonna fucking kill you," from my dad. "You fucking freak," from my mom. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at us as we all stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. They were called, they came, and they searched, but they never found him. Bastard must have hopped a fence or some shit. Still to this day I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically, and for months, until he... What really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe, he moved on to a house down the street, with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room, watching them sleep, jacking it, I think. I still don't think he was caught, even then. All I know is that it could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car when I was passing him, telling him no, I didn't need a ride, and to leave me alone. All these years later I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. It's fucked up. I turn out my lights, entirely, to exercise. I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. It just scarred me, even though it wasn't a huge deal. Peeper fucked up my sense of safety, targeted me for months, was almost caught, then left me alone, we think. Then moved on to a house with 2 little girls. I am a male 26 years of age and am currently in this situation as I type this. I have been our domestic house manager's target for close to a year now. She has been stalking me in vain. I don't know what I possess that she sees in me. I have tried to give my parents signals to understand what's going on, like how the cartoon Courage the Cowardly Dog does it, but in vain. In 2020 I ceased to sit and eat with them on the dinner table because the house manager had a habit of letting out gossip of what I was doing during the day, who I talked to, etc. It was just late last year that I decided to carry my cell phone everywhere I move around the house and discreetly record the events at the time. One time she was recorded her saying how she took and disposed one of my mum's favorite pet cat. I sent the brief footage to both my mum and cousin. I am glad I saw those red flags that no one else is able to see. She isn't getting in my feelings this. My advice is first know that the person is actually stalking you, pay attention to the repeated stalking patterns, then immediately try to collect as much evidence as you can. Your phone is a great tool, but you can also use audio recorder if the stalker is loud mouth. And also make sure you talk to someone you would trust and confide in. 3 years ago, it was the beginning of August, and I was 3 months into my brand new job when I left work, walked through the empty parking structure with my taser tucked inside the sleeve of my jacket, my eyes darting toward every dark nook and cranny. It was somewhere around 1 a.m. and the parking lot was deserted, which made every hair on my body stand on end. My phone was in my pocket, with my best friend on the line, listening for a scream. I clutched my keys in my other hand. The second I saw my car, I sped up, tugging on the door just as a habit before I went to unlock it. Before I could do that, however, the door opened in my hand. I cocked my head, sure I'd locked it. No, wait. I wasn't sure. I was positive. I knew for a fact I'd locked the doors, because I knew what happened to stupid little girls when they didn't lock the doors. Still, a part of me wondered if, maybe, just maybe this once, I'd forgotten. I got in the car. Shut the door behind me. Hit the lock button. Told my best friend I was safe in my car. Hung up. Lather, rinse, repeat. It was only after I'd started to put my key in the ignition that I froze. I'm a pretty short girl, so it only took a moment to realize that the seat was pushed back much farther than I ever would have pushed it. I looked around, my eyes sweeping the interior. Although there wasn't anything jarringly obvious, something was off. Brushing past my unease, I turned the key in the ignition. All around me are familiar faces. I jumped, my hand flying to my mouth, as music blasted from my stereo. The wipers scraped. All my dashboard settings had been changed, the time set 4 hours and 14 minutes into the future. All my radio stations, except for the 4th station that I was currently listening to, had been changed to static. He's here. I spun around, half expecting to see a darkly dressed figure sitting in the back seat. No one was there, of course. But the blanket I'd had strung across the seat was now perfectly folded, and on top of that rested a tiny silver box. Inside, there was the edge of a torn parking pass for the hotel I worked at. That's all. Just enough for me to know what it was, what it meant, but not enough for me to know who it belonged to. I checked the rest of my car, searched for any sign of tampering. At some point, I realized that my car hadn't been broken into. The doors had been unlocked, and they'd been able to turn my car on, but they hadn't hotwired the car. I could see that clearly. I called my dad. I need you to check and see if you still have my spare key, I said. Still half asleep, my dad grumbled, it's outside in the truck. My blood ran cold. My dad's truck, that had been sitting outside all day. My dad's truck, that he wouldn't have noticed someone breaking into because it was 20 years old and didn't have an alarm, like my new car. Please, I whispered, too scared to raise my voice. For once, he didn't argue. He went outside, he checked his car, and he told me what I already knew. My key wasn't there. In its place, however, he'd found a little bouncy ball, like the one you'd get from a quarter machine at the grocery store. He was in your car. My dad sounded horrified, but not surprised. We were never surprised anymore. Wait, my dad paused. What about your spare house key? Is it still there? No, no, no. I held my breath as I rummaged through my glove compartment. I nearly tore the whole thing apart, silent tears running down my face as I searched for something I knew. We'll change the locks, my dad promised. What he didn't say was again. I cried the whole time I drove home. My dad waited on the front porch for me, a gun tucked in the waistband of his pants. Inside, I barricaded myself in my room. I pushed my dresser in front of the door, took a blanket and sat in the corner of the room, with one of my dad's guns on the floor next to me and a knife in my hand. I stayed there until the sun came up, and I stayed there until my eyes were too dry to cry any more tears. I stayed there so long I wasn't even 100% sure I was awake anymore. I stared at the single bouncy ball on the floor in front of me, nudging it back and forth with the tip of my knife.